What's up, everyone? Welcome to Let's Talk, the series where we love artificial beings. This is your friendly neighborhood Birdman, and today we're talking Marvel's Eternals. So, the Eternals is about a group of superpowered artificial sentient beings created by the Celestials, primordial beings that are responsible for the creation of most, if not all, life in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The purpose of the Eternals is to combat the Deviants, a race of monsters that have spanned the universe and gotten out of control. The film follows the Eternals as they oversee the development of human life on Earth for 7,000 years, until one day, something sinister begins to emerge from the Earth itself. I really like the Eternals. I had high hopes for this film and wanted it to address certain things in the MCU that I felt needed to be addressed, and while it did some of those things, it faltered in other ways that left me a bit deflated. First, the good. The very large cast did a great job, with the standouts being Gemma Chan as Cersei, Tyree Henry as Festus, and Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice that this is not Gemma's first time in the MCU, as she originally played the doomed Kree fighter Minerva in Captain Marvel, which threw me for a loop the first time I saw the trailer for this film. They're not the same character, thankfully, as Minerva was something of a background character and Cersei is the heart of this film. Tyree Henry is really funny, and I think it's a shame that he is somewhat underused in this film. He plays a character that is sure to rustle the jimmies of certain people. You'll know exactly who I'm talking about when you see this movie. In any case, I thought he was fantastic, and I want to see more from this character moving forward. Kumail Nanjiani is this movie's MCU guy. He brings most of the comedy in this film, and pretty much all of it hits. But what did you expect from Stuber? Yes, that's the same guy. It's a wonder what a healthy diet and going to the gym a few times a week can do for you. The rest of the cast is star-studded. I mean, you've got Kit Harrington and Richard Madden of Game of Thrones fame, Angelina Jolie, Selma Hayek, and even one of Korea's funniest and best actors, Don Lee from Train to Busan. The only issue I have here is that some of them feel underused simply due to how the story is told. And considering this film is 2 hours and 37 minutes long, that's not exactly acceptable. I want to go off on a side tangent here and compare an aspect of this movie with Zack Snyder's Justice League for a bit. Beyond the superficial concept of a team of superheroes, the Eternals boasts analogs to the Justice League, such as Icarus being the obvious Superman analog, Athena being the Wonder Woman analog, Festus being a cyborg analog, and Makkari being an analog of the Flash. I feel like Eternals gives us action sequences that Justice League should have. Icarus's action scenes are straight up Superman. He's super strong, fast, and uses his heat vision very liberally. Heck, Marvel reveals that even the people of the MCU think of him as Superman, as the Man of Steel is explicitly name-dropped in this film, confirming that DC Comics exist in the MCU. I thought that was really neat, but that's not why I'm bringing this up. The real reason for this tangent is the character of Makkari, the speedster of the group. She is what Zack Snyder's Flash should have been. Her action scenes are extraordinary, and it shows that Marvel knows how to do speedster characters better than DC does, even with the stupid-ass death of Quicksilver. What I mean is, she's not nerfed in this film the way almost every single speedster character gets nerfed in superhero movies. The Flash was treated as a non-entity in the majority of Justice League due to Zack Snyder being weird about superheroes. I've said this before. I like Zack, but his vision for superheroes leaves a lot to be desired. His explanation for Flash not moving humans is silly and inaccurate to the comics themselves. Makkari, on the other hand, doesn't run like an idiot and has no problem moving humans at light speed because these are comic characters and trying to make them realistic is stupid in the first place. I mean, you're talking about a universe with a dude that's basically a god, can shoot lasers from his eyes, and lift buildings. If we're being real, Superman should never be able to catch Lois when she's falling because that's not how the abrupt halting of someone's inertia works. Except, according to Zack, Superman can catch Lois when she's falling from a skyscraper. Trying to tell me Flash would kill humans if he moved them is an insanely arbitrary line in the sand to draw and shows a lack of understanding of the character. You mentioned the Speed Force in the movie, for fuck's sake. The choices made in Justice League regarding Flash makes him largely useless for the majority of the runtime until the end of the film where he gets an admittedly brilliant scene. Makkari actually does a lot for the team in all of her scenes, and when fighting, she is an absolute beast, doing things we've been wanting to see Flash do on the big screen forever. I feel like DC needs to take a look at this movie, and when they introduce Wally West, model him on Makkari. Tangent over. The plot of Eternals is fairly enjoyable, if not a bit long-winded and somewhat heavy-handed. What I enjoyed the most was the fact that since the Eternals were overseeing humanity's development since 5000 BC, humanity began basing their myths and legends on the Eternals themselves. For example, the Eternal Warrior Athena, played by Angelina Jolie, is the basis for the Greek goddess of war, Athena, and the Eternal Inventor Festus, played by Tyree Henry, is the basis for the Greek god of forgery, Hephaestus. When you start to make the connections with the characters' names, you then start to see how the Eternals have influenced a lot of the characters within the MCU. Now, for some things that I didn't care for. The biggest issue I had with this movie was its runtime. Usually I am a-okay with long movies, especially if the material is engaging and engrossing. That's not to say that this movie is not engaging, it's just that you feel every one of those 157 minutes. This is one of those movies where scenes go on entirely too long and could have had more interesting scenes in place of those, or could have simply been cut. Towards the end, the movie could have ended about 3 different times, but just kept going. Another issue I had, and this may not be a big deal to you, but I didn't care for the differences between this and the source material. In the comics, the Celestials play a role in the development of humanity, and that bit of source material is intact. However, the Celestials also created the X-Men, and I felt like this was the perfect movie to set up the X-Gene so that we can segue into some MCU X-Men stories. While that may still be on the table in the future, it's absent from this film, and I can't understand why, considering Disney owns the X-Men now. Tangentially, since this movie also features deviants, they should have also touched on the fact that Thanos himself is an Eternal with the deviant gene. This is what I meant when I said the MCU got rid of Thanos way too early. That character still has many stories left to tell. Lastly, I'd like to touch upon something I mentioned in my Black Widow review. In that video, I said that the MCU seems afraid of advancing the story beyond Avengers Endgame. Loki and Shang-Chi have changed my perspective on this, but this movie brings me back to this point, but on the opposite side. The MCU seems like it's setting up way too many stories. I'm not seeing the connection between this movie, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Shang-Chi. Heck, even Loki is doing Kang the Conqueror, so my point is that this movie is setting up conflict with cosmic beings and doesn't seem affected by the timeline shenanigans in Loki. The end credit scene of Shang-Chi seemed as if they were setting up a connection with Eternals, but that's left open-ended too. With all the other phases, Marvel seemed to have a connected world where events happening in one film affected the other, such as Iron Man showing up in The Incredible Hulk or Loki pursuing the first Avengers Tesseract in The Avengers. All of these movies and shows aren't connecting to each other in meaningful ways. Hell, most people are going to be confused with both the end credit scenes in The Eternals because they're setting up another story, one different than the one in the upcoming Spider-Man movie. I'll reserve the right to be wrong about this, but I'm not seeing the connections here. Marvel just seems content with mentioning the blip over and over. In the end, I thought this was a good movie worth seeing in theaters with friends and family. It deals with a lot of high concept themes that makes it feel fresh in the context of the MCU. They actually show Celestials in their real form, so there's a sense of scale and consequence in this movie that other MCU films didn't have. The action scenes are great, and the CGI is 99% well done, with the lone exception of a scene involving Selma Hayek in a snowy area. You'll know it when you see it. While I was enjoying my time with this film, I did think it ran a little long, and that wouldn't be a problem normally, but this film is something of a chore to watch, and that's because some of these scenes are a little too long. I'd also prefer if there were a bit more immediate connection with all these other MCU properties, and not some tease to a movie that comes out in 2028. We are in the midst of a pandemic after all. Some of us might not make it that far out. I mean, The Avengers was only 4 years after Iron Man. A B. Even with my complaint of the seemingly loose connections of Phase 4 MCU, they're starting to heat up. Having the Celestials meddle with Earth is a big deal in the comics and has far-reaching consequences like the aforementioned X-Men connection and even Galactus himself. I'm very excited to see where all of this is leading, even if I'm a little impatient with all these loose threads. Anyway, this has been your friendly neighborhood Birdman, and I'll see you in the next one.